Assalamu alaikum. I was hoping my mom would make it back, but I think my son has commandeered her in the room back there. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So I'm not a speaker by nature. I'm a writer, as you can tell from the bio that was read about me. So I have done what a writer does, and I wrote exactly what I wanted to say today. And there's a lot of pages, so you will have to bear with me. Juhi gave me 10 minutes, but I might go a little bit over that. I have a lot to say, and I have a lot of stories to tell, and I would like you all to, pay attention and listen and hopefully get something out of it. So on November 17th, 2011, 3 years before there was a Muhsen, or even the idea of this organization, before there was any definitive effort to create inclusionary programs and support services in our masjids and Muslim communities for people with disabilities and their families, I wrote an article. And this article was about what one of the only outreach programs was happening, sponsored by Muslims for people with disabilities that I knew about. And that was Mass DC's Eid celebration for special needs families. So I'd like to read for you now what I wrote 7 years ago. And although it is written specifically to our autism experience and the experience of others who are autistic or are in an autism family, it goes for the Muslim community, disability community in general. What I wrote was this: anyone who tries to connect that divide between raising an autistic child and adhering to faith traditions knows what a difficult task that is. And I'm not talking about the crisis of faith, about those what is God's plan, or why my child, or will my prayers ever be answered type of problems. I'm talking about including special needs children and faith practices in our houses of worship. Whether the child is high functioning, moderate, or severely autistic, whether he can talk or not, if he has a behavior problem or problems in social settings, whatever the nature of his autism is, finding a way to incorporate him into religious ceremonies or specific practices of faith, or just to be part of a faith community in any way, shape, or form, can be an exercise in frustration and futility, especially if one's house of worship does not have a plan of inclusion for special needs children, and most of them don't. Within the Muslim community, at least in the Muslim American community, I've seen little inclusion of special needs children and adults in our masjids. As I've connected with more and more Muslim families with autistic children, one of our biggest sources of sadness and frustration is that we often feel that the welcome mat is not out for our children. Going for salat, especially Jummah salat, at the mosque is something I have not done with our eldest son Danish in a long time. Salat is very exact and precise. It's an exercise in worship. We must stand in straight lines, shoulder to shoulder, avoiding gaps in between. We must follow the direction of our imam and concentrate on our prayer. And any kids who get rowdy during salat usually get a reprimand. Even in the ladies section, where moms are more sympathetic to crying babies and fidgety children, a child who is quite disruptive is not really welcome. So my son is constantly on the move, and when he is stimming, he is very loud. I've had sisters come and give me a talking to when I've tried to keep Danish with me during Friday prayers, not to mention the tons of looks that I get. Sometimes I try and explain what the situation is, and sometimes I find that it's simply not worth it. I stopped going with him to Jummah prayers years and years ago. I stopped taking him to Taraweeh during Ramadan as well. The rush of people, the loudness of prayers being said over the microphone, it's just too much. I tried it a few times, and we're talking a good 7 years ago, but I met my Waterloo when after a day of fasting, I broke my fast and then took him into the hallway during Maghrib prayers because he was being disruptive. Or more accurately, he was being Danish, and that wasn't welcome. He got so agitated that I ended up taking him home, and hours later, I realized that I never prayed Maghrib at all. That was the last time I took him to a community iftar or Taraweeh prayer at our masjid. I stopped making attempts to come after that as well in any regular manner, spending most of my nights in the years to come at home with my son. And because I stayed home, that meant that my other younger children often did so as well with me. Eid prayers can be hit or miss. While we have successfully been able to take him to most Eid prayers and pray myself because we are in a big community center, and I position myself in the back or on the edge where I can keep an eye on him, I still feel the void for him. There seems to be nothing geared towards making him feel a part of the celebration. And I know the fault doesn't lie entirely with our masjid, the imam, or our Muslim community. It's imperative upon me to be an advocate for my son, to introduce him to the congregation, to fight for his place, to talk to the imam and explain our needs. But when you're fighting battles of inclusion at every turn, when you expect your mosque and your religious community to be your sanctity, you don't want to have to make an effort there. You want that effort to be made for you. So this was something that I wrote in conjunction with my husband upon attending the Muslim American Society of Washington, D.C.'s Special Needs Eid ceremony in 2011, after the conclusion of Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. That year, Danish, Amal, Hamza, and I, and our whole family, we had never attended something like that in our lives. This was an event put together by a Muslim organization catering to Muslims with all manners of disabilities, physical, cognitive, intellectual, all of them. The organizer was Rasha Abulloham, who's here today. And she had an awesome brother whose name is Muhammad, and he's autistic also. And that was her motivation to put this event together, which has occurred now for years, for which we drove nearly 2 hours from Richmond to attend several times. My husband took Danish to that very first special Eid celebration, and he wrote this for me when he came back. Quote, "The Zuhr prayer was certainly the highlight of the event. All the parents and kids had gathered in the prayer hall after lunch, and the imam, he gave a brief talk on the importance of salat, or even for kids with special needs. He then explained that even though Zuhr prayer is normally offered in silence, he would make an exception for the special Jamaat. He would read aloud at every step so that the kids could benefit in listening to how salat is offered. To see these kids standing in khayam and do sajda before Allah, their creator, was something special. They may have stood in crooked lines. Their wudu may have been imperfect, but there was something about this Jamaat that really tugged at everyone's hearts. After all, it was Allah's angels on earth in congregation." So I'm relating this story to you for 2 reasons. One is that I've always publicly wanted to thank Rasha for what she spearheaded and continues to do. And 2, I tell this story to make a point. For those of us living with disabilities or supporting, caring for, or loving someone with a disability, we know that nothing comes easily. We know that this world is not configured to automatically help us, those living with disabilities and their families. We know this world is not configured to automatically help, support, accommodate, and include us. We know how to reconfigure the world. We need to work hard, to fight, to spread awareness and action, to demand change, to facilitate change, to be the brokers of that change. We know we need to change the narrative, to demand our right to dignified, respectful, and inclusive living. We also know that when you are the one who is living with the disability, or you are the family of a loved one with a disability, you have a bucket of energy you're working with. You use that energy and drive from that bucket to set your priorities and fight for what you need to live in this dunya or this world, and pray that whatever cannot be done or changed is rewarded to you in multitude in the akhirat or the hereafter. So let me just draw upon our family's example. Our son Danish, who is here with us tonight, which is an extraordinary thing that I want to touch upon later, is nearly 18. He is autistic, nonverbal, but certainly not non-communicative, and the best son that a mother could ever hope and pray for. He is more than any descriptors I could offer, and suffice it to say, it has been a long journey with him, and inshallah, there are miles and miles to go. As his parents, we have spent an enormous amount of time in battles and negotiations, in advocacy work and in meetings, working with our local school system to fight for the best individualized education plan for him year after year, working with his classroom teachers and aides to help set up the best programming for him, constantly having behavior plans written up and keeping copious notes to try and understand what may be triggers, where he is making progress, and what needs to be tweaked constantly in that process. When public school no longer worked for Danish, we fought and negotiated and worked with the school system to get him placed in a private school, which made a lot of difference in his life. A lot of our energy, a lot of my energy from my bucket goes to this. A second portion of my energy goes to managing his medical needs. He has had a series of medical setbacks and issues that we are constantly puzzling through, and that's with his father being a physician himself. We have traveled up and down this country meeting with doctors to help figure out some of Danish's medical complexities. and I'm forever attuned to all of his nonverbal behaviors and indicators of different medical issues that may be afoot. A third portion of my energy goes to managing a team of caregivers who are constantly coming and going in and out of Danish's life. It takes a team to help him and our whole family have a stable life, and finding people whom I trust to do right by my son takes a huge amount of mental wherewithal. I would say the fourth portion of our bucket of energy goes to managing his Medicaid journey and the support afforded to him through our state and federal government. This could be an entire topic by itself, but all I want to say at this time is that it is all-encompassing. In fighting and in working hard for Danish and with Danish in these four areas of his and our life, the fifth portion that unfortunately falls by the wayside is our mosque or our masjid and our life within our Muslim community. This is not to say that we don't have faith in our lives. On the contrary, my trust in clinging to Allah at times has been the only way to keep moving forward on this journey of ours. But what is missing, what always has been missing, is the ability to incorporate the masjid and community events, apart from our communal Eid prayers, into our life. And where I know that the only way to change things in our masjid and community is for me to do something about it, and God knows that I have not fought in this area like I fought in other areas, it's because my bucket of energy is low. It's low after attending to these other four areas of our life, and this doesn't even consider parenting our other children and managing work, family, and life in general. So I want to once again read to you two things to emphasize this point. On August 4th of 2011, I wrote what was probably one of the first public articles or posts about our struggles in faith and disability, and it was Ramadan, and I wrote this: I constantly remind myself of two things from the Quran. So verily, with every difficulty there is ease. Verily, with every difficulty there is ease. But sometimes it isn't enough, and I hate to admit that, but there it is. From an oft-quoted hadith, 3 supplications shall never be rejected: the parent of a prayer for his child, the prayer of one who is fasting, and the prayer of the traveler. So I ask, why not me? Why is my simple prayer for my son, that he not have bad meltdowns and have some peace and happiness, why isn't that answered? I am his mother. I am fasting. Yes, it is pathetic and rather arrogant of me to question Allah's wisdom. I know this. I tell myself all the time that He answers our prayers in ways that we don't even understand, in wisdom that He only knows, that everything happens for a reason. But when I see my son upset, wailing and crying for hours on end, when he exhausts himself to sleep only to wake up and start over again, and when I see him work so hard to manage his autism, when I see his frustrations because I cannot understand him, when I, his mother, cannot fix his problems, that's when the struggle overwhelms me, and I question my prayers, and I question my fasting, and I question why I can't seem to give more. And I ask this question: is he suffering because I am not good enough? And that is my struggle. And then in April of 2013, in Autism Awareness Month, I wrote this: when it comes to the American Muslim community and beyond, we are nowhere near action. We are light years behind action. We are in the beginning stages of awareness. And for a community engaging in social and political activism, hotly debating topics like equality in marriage, or providing better space for women in our masjids, or whether even breathable nail polish is wudu friendly, what are we doing for our Muslim families with special needs? We are committed to owning our own narratives and taking action in many worthy arenas. But what about the most vulnerable in our communities? What of their families? What about the spiritual struggles of these families with special needs? Embracing them, including them, connecting them to resources and helping them in the ways that they need help. What are we doing? Not much, and that's unacceptable. And we live in a great country with all its flaws and problems, and it is still, in my opinion, one of the best places to live if you have a disability. You're legally granted education and supports if you have a disability, although the process to ensure that these needs are being met is a battle. There is constant work to be done to make sure that businesses, events, and all areas of public life are inclusive. Churches and synagogues and other houses of worship have been making their own strides to help their disabled congregants. Nothing is perfect by any means. It's a constant work in progress. But what has been missing for Muslim families living with disabilities and for their families? attention and care from our masjids, from our mosques, from our Muslim community centers, and our Muslim community events. And this is the point I really want to make that I hope you all remember. If there is one area of our life where support and awareness should be a no-brainer, where it should be embodied as part of what our faith prescribes to us, it should be in our masjids and in our Muslim community events. And that was what was been missing all along. And frankly, I had no energy to fight for it on my own community, not when I heard or saw most of the time was sincere but empty platitudes and tepid offers of support. So you know what started to change all this, which is why we are here today. When an organization called Muslims Understanding and Helping Special Needs Education was born in the September of 2014, the brainchild of one Juhi Tahir, with the support and backing of Sheikh Umar Suleiman. Juhi and I had met before Muhsen was conceived. As parents to autistic Muslim children, our stories intersected and weaved until hers could be mine and mine could be hers. And I don't know how she found the energy in her bucket to do something in the one area of our lives that was sorely lacking in support for our families, but she did. She and her team started Muhsen. What was missing before in our Muslim communities? We didn't have model programs to offer our masjids. We didn't have documents and examples outlining what is needed to make our masjids more inclusive and supported to congregants with disabilities and their families. We didn't have adjusted curriculum for Sunday schools. We didn't have support services, respite, support groups where our unique issues as Muslims could be safely discussed with people who truly understand. But now there are options. Now there are things available to help our communities and masjids and community organized events to learn what needs to be done and what needs to be done to make things more inclusive and supportive, to listen more and to center disabled voices. Muhsen has made that all happen. And so as this evening goes on, you will hear more about what Muhsen and all it has to offer. And the point I want to make now, the thing I want you to remember is that we don't need to be alone in all of this. We don't have to try and fight the battles and spread the awareness and education to our communities and our masjids as individuals. We have an organization to help create these necessary partnerships and spearhead these efforts. In 4 short years, Muhsen has accomplished the extraordinary. They have a fully developed masjid certification program, which you'll hear more about tonight. They have done the Muhsen Umrah, which is taking the first group of disabled Muslims and families for a specially tailored Umrah this past December, an experience that was nothing short of miraculous and beautiful. They have weekend Sunday school curriculum available for schools across the country to adopt and follow, supplies and materials tailored to help youth with special needs on various aspects of our deen, respite services for families where local chapters are located, support services for local families where local chapters are, something that I could have sorely used over the years, Qurans in Braille, special Eid prayer accommodations in Chicago and in other areas, and awareness events all over the country. As families and individuals, we don't need to be alone in the fight for what should have been with us there all along. Muhsen is here, ready and willing to partner with masjids and communities around the country and around the world. Therefore, it is crucial for all of us to not only support this organization, but to bring Muhsen and their programs to all our cities and communities right here in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. So I want to close with one last story, and I really do appreciate for all of you for sticking with me and listening to me this long. Today, our family is at this event, our entire family. Myself, my husband, my 3 children, all of them, my in-laws, my parents, my sister-in-law, her children, everybody is here. This is the first fundraiser or an event like this that we have ever attended with Danish in our life. We have been to plenty. Thank you. The applause goes to Muhsen. We have been to plenty of events and fundraisers in our lives. Iftars at our masjid, Tarawih prayers when we can go, but we're frankly unable to take Danish with us. 1, because he doesn't typically enjoy or can manage events like this, but 2, because these events typically have no accommodations for him. But tonight we are here. We are all here. And I've spoken at ISNA and countless other arenas on the topic of Muslim communities and disability inclusions about Danish and our family's challenges and stories, and he is never with me. It should be his stories. It should be his narrative. It should be about him. And tonight it is. And for that reason, I am thankful to Muhsen because they know what it takes, and they went above and beyond, as they always do, to be inclusive. And for that, I am grateful. And for that, I say shukr, alhamdulillah. So be generous with your ears, with your wallets. If you leave with anything tonight, leave with the resolve to help your local masjids and communities partner with this group, and you're not going to regret it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, and I thank you for listening to me.